everybody. It's Karen Foley back here in the library with Authors Night. Today we have a very special guest, very special because I've been waiting a long time to finally have the great opportunity of meeting you. It's Kenneth Cloke and his book, Dance of the Opposites, an exploration in mediation, dialogue, and conflict resolution.
Systems design.
Systems design, okay. You have a wonderful background. I'll do the bragging for you. It's a Bachelor of Arts at University of California, Berkeley, Juris Doctorate at Berkeley, postdoctorate, work in Yale, and a graduate of the National Judicial College.
There are two others.
Okay.
I have an LLM, which is a Master's in Law degree from UCLA,
UCLA.
and a PhD from UCLA.
Go Bruins. That's wonderful.
Yes.
And you do a lot of work, and not only busy as an author, you're a director of the Center for Dispute Resolution, a mediator, arbitrator, attorney, coach, consultant, and trainer, and a speaker, and an author of many other books. How many books have you written, sir?
This is actually number 13, if you count editions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, exactly where does the title come from, The Dance of the Opposites?
For the last 35 years, I have mediated thousands of disputes of different kinds. Disputes between married couples, disputes in families, disputes between divorcing couples, organizational disputes, community disputes, criminal law cases, all kinds of disputes. And what happens in all of them is that there's an invitation into a dance. We have the phrase in English, it takes two to tango. And that's part of what happens in mediation, or rather in conflict. What we don't recognize is that there's a hidden corollary, which is it takes one to stop the tango. And that one could be you. So the object is to look at all the different ways in which that dance of conflict takes place, and all the different ways in which you can stop the dance or change the music or change the way that you're dancing with each other. But it is always a dance. So one of the opening quotations in the book is from the Sufi poet Rumi, Jalaluddin Rumi. He says, "Live at the empty heart of paradox. I'll dance with you there, cheek to cheek."
Well written.
That's a different kind of dance.
But conflict, when people disagree and it comes to a point, don't you feel that sometimes conflict can be more than a disagreement and it can become a dangerous dialogue?
Yes, as a matter of fact, if you think about what it takes to create a conflict, in fact, if you think of it as creating a recipe for conflict, and you ask, what are the ingredients that you would have to cook up a conflict? The first is you have to have two or more people, because without two, there's no conflict. That can be two or more sides of the same person, but there have to be two or more, or there's no conflict. Second, there has to be some disagreement between those two. If they're on the same side, there's no conflict. But there's a third element, because if you ask the question, can you have two or more people who have a disagreement and not have a conflict? The answer is yes. And what is the third element? The third element is the presence of intense negative emotion. So the difference between a disagreement and a conflict is the presence of unresolved emotion in either or both of the parties.
Wouldn't you say perhaps that one can disagree with themselves?
Yeah. So here we have three truths. The first is every conflict has an emotional component. And therefore, it is necessary for the mediator or anyone who's interested in resolving their conflicts to gain some knowledge of what is happening emotionally inside themselves and inside the other person. The second is the purpose of the mediator is really significantly different from the purpose of the therapist. The purpose of the therapist is really to work within the emotion and help bring knowledge of the nature of the emotion to some deeper understanding of what is happening for that person in terms of themselves for the most part, whereas the mediator is primarily focused on reaching agreements and practical agreements. But in order to do that, it's necessary to work with the conflict and turn it into a mechanism of problem solving. And the third point is there's such a huge gray area that nobody could ever draw a line between these two pieces of work. It's simply not possible to clearly differentiate them. There are therapists who do a lot of mediative work, and there are mediators who do a lot of therapeutic work. So there's an enormous gray area in between, and it's simply a result of the fact that we are all working with emotion. So as a mediator, I have to be sensitive to what is taking place emotionally with the people that I'm working with. And that's one element in the design of a conversation that might work.
I mean, what type of groups do you work with? What type? I know probably families, conflicts. What else?
I work with families, I work with corporations, I work with government institutions, I work with hospitals, I work with nonprofits, schools, all kinds of different groups. But if we take the smallest group, which is a couple, all of the things that happen within larger groups happen kind of in miniature and in a slightly different form between couples. So there are miscommunications. There are intense emotions that get distorted and take a different form. And in each of these, the role of the mediator is a little bit different, but fundamentally the same, because it's the same part of our brain that's creating the conflict. And that is essentially the limbic system, the part that processes emotion.
When you mentioned communication, you can take a simple sentence like, "I'm glad to see you." And depending on where the emphasis is, or the perceived emphasis, can change the meaning of the entire sentence.
Everything changes. Here's an example given by a mathematician and science fiction writer whose name is Rudy Rucker. He takes a single sentence and changes the emphasis on the words. The sentence is, "I'm glad to see you." "I'm glad to see you" means even if no one else is.
Yes.
"I'm glad to see you," like why wouldn't I be? "I'm glad to see you," as opposed to talking to you on the phone. "I'm glad to see you," but not the jerk that you came in with, etc. And it keeps on going. So it turns out that you can say almost anything and have layers of meaning that flow from where you place the emphasis, tone of voice, body language, context in terms of what else is happening inside your relationship. And all of these have an impact on the meaning of the communication, which is, after all, what really matters. So when people say, for example, "Stop yelling at me," you can whisper and yell. But the other person says, "I'm not yelling," meaning I'm not raising my voice, I'm not shouting. But what yelling means is it feels like you have raised your voice because I'm getting from you a lot of negative feedback, and I don't like it. It doesn't feel good. So will you please stop doing that? If I say, "Will you please be nice to me?" that means I have to open up and become a little more vulnerable in your presence. And I don't know that I trust you enough to do that. But if I say, "Stop yelling at me," the theory is that you will feel sorry for me and realize that you've engaged in behavior that's counterproductive and will switch tracks. But it doesn't work that way. And the reason is because of what I describe in the first chapter of the book, which is about the language of conflict. The most common word out of most people's mouths when they are in conflict is the word "you." But if you think about the form of that pronoun, the form is an accusation when it's connected to something negative. So simply by saying you, connected with something negative, what you are going to create is the typical response to any accusation. No, I'm not, and you're something else, right? That's what will happen automatically, none of which is productive, none of which is oriented to what the real issue is, all of which triggers a counter response in the person who's now been accused of having accused the other person of something. So it turns in a circle. So what's the alternative? Well, in the first place, there are lots of pronouns. If you use exactly the same content, for example, you are lazy. Response, no, I'm not, and you're bossy, right? Now, how would you say it if you were to use the pronoun it? Well, you would say, there's a lot of work to be done. How should it be divided? Nobody's going to say, no, I'm not, if you say that. So what you've done is, by using a different pronoun, you have altered the entire dance. That's a good example of how the dance of opposites switches into becoming a collaborative dance, a beautiful dance, and that's what is possible in every conflict. If you use the word I, that's either a confession or a request. And if you use the word we, I, meaning a request is, I would really like some help here. Or I can be, I'm working very hard here and I'm feeling like you don't care about any of this stuff. That's more the confession. And we is an invitation into collaboration and partnership.
Thank you very much. That's beautiful, beautifully said, and makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
I may even have to apply it myself to get jobs done around the house.
That's the hard part.
Stay with us. We're taking a short break. Coming back to Kenneth Cloke and the Dance of the Opposites.
Where is this guy? So thirsty.
I hear he travels from the north.
Look!
That one's really dry.
LA is in a drought, yet over half of our drinking water is being used for landscaping. But it doesn't have to be that way. Just 1 inch of rain can yield thousands of gallons of water for use in landscaping and saves drinking water for drinking. Rain barrels, cisterns, and curb cuts are just a few ways to save water and energy. For more, visit LADWP and the Bay Foundation online.
Back to Author's Night, Kenneth Cloke and the Dance of the Opposites. In your book, I read that there are 3 methods of resolving disputes: power, right, and interests. How would you delineate that? How would you explain that?
Great. This is really at the very heart of dispute resolution. If we imagine right now in this very comfortable setting, that there is an air conditioning unit that's on, and the air conditioning unit can either be on or off. How do we resolve that dispute? Well, you want it on and I want it off. How do we decide? One way is by power, meaning whoever has the most power wins. Since you're the host, I'm assuming that's going to be you. But it may come down to physical strength, where it might be me, or it may come down to money, where it might be you again, or to prestige, or to any number of different forms of power. But what happens if you simply control the air conditioning unit and say, I'm sorry, I'm deciding? I don't feel very good about it if I've lost that. And so you've just lost me as a partner. Besides which, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And there are a series of other mechanisms. If I'm the one who decides, and women generally don't get to decide at all, we've just created prejudice as a result of the unequal distribution of power. So a second option is rights. And how do we do it with rights? Well, let's vote. Well, let's say we are more people on this side than there are on this side of the room, so this side wins the battle. How do the people on the other side feel? Not very good. If you're constantly losing the vote, it doesn't feel very good. It feels better than power, but it's kind of bureaucratic, and you need courts in order to decide who's really right. And once again, there's a winner and a loser. With interests, the question is completely different. And with the air conditioning example, what would happen is I would say, why do you want it on? And the answer is, I'm really steaming over here. So how about if we bring in a fan? I say I want it off because I'm freezing. How about if somebody brings me a jacket? If we bring in a space heater? I want it on because it's stuffy. What if we open a window or a door? Meaning, nobody has to freeze so that somebody else isn't stuffy. That was a false dichotomy. It was a dance of opposites when in fact it could have been a dance in which everybody won, in which we are all moving together. So what we do in conflict resolution is we distinguish between positions, which are what you want, and interests, which are the reasons why you want it. And it's possible to have your interests satisfied even when your position isn't. So instead of going to court and having one person win and the other one lose, we search for ways in which everybody gets some measure of what they want. That isn't easy. It's a struggle. And so the mediator is a person who facilitates the search for a higher order solution, a way of combining opposites that isn't just compromise, but is actually potentially the discovery of a higher order solution. So for example, there are two ways of combining things together. You can take hot water and cold water, mix them together, and you get lukewarm water. Or you can take water and heat and flour and make bread. And it's the bread that we're looking for. And the bread grows out of the conflict, but it only grows out of the conflict if you're able to escape the emotional trap of assuming that this is somebody who hates you, who you hate, who you can't listen to, and can't learn from. And that's what all of us slip into in conflict.
Well, I've heard the word emotion many times already that you're speaking, so it seems to me that one vital component of most, if not all, disputes is emotion.
Yes, absolutely. And yet, here's where it becomes a little bit tricky. Let's take the most dominant emotion, which is anger. What you will discover if you work with anger for a period of time is it is not the deepest emotion. Here's a very easy, simple way of understanding it. If you have a child who goes out into the middle of a busy street and cars are whizzing past, you clearly rush out to the street and pull your child back to the sidewalk. And now you're about to say something to your child, and you're likely to express it in an angry tone of voice, which makes sense because your child just did something dangerous and might do it again because they weren't hurt. So anger is a way of saying, I'm going to attach a little pain to what you just did, so you'll think about the pain I caused you, and maybe you won't do it next time. But immediately before you yelled at your child, what were you feeling?
Fear.
Fear. Beneath anger is fear. How often? Often enough to be able to ask the question, what are you afraid will happen? And beneath fear is the perception of the possibility of pain and loss and grief and guilt if something bad happened to your child. And so it's possible for you to ask even deeper, how would it feel to you if that were to take place? And even that's not the ground yet. We now have 3 different conversations. Get out of the street, don't you dare do that again. That scared the heck out of me. If anything bad happened to you, I would feel awful. But there's one more. Why would you feel awful if something bad happened to your child?
Because you love them.
Because you love them. So beneath all of them, the ground of your yelling at your child is not anger, it's love. And now we can go back to the beginning and see nobody gets angry over things they don't care about. So all anger is about caring. Which conversation would you rather have? The angry one or the one that says, why do you care so deeply about this? Why does this mean so much to you? And that's the conversation that will turn the dance into something beautiful.
That's quite beautiful, and it resonates with me in particular. I won't go into why, but it clears up so much of why people get angry and what the real anger is all about. It's not about anger.
There's so much
Fear,
here.
it's love. It's,
Yeah.
It may not even be anger at all.
So what happens in nearly all conflicts is that people are caring about something and are having a hard time expressing their caring. First of all, because it feels kind of like maybe you're weaker when you express your caring than when you express the anger.
Certainly
It
more
feels more
vulnerable.
powerful. Huh?
Vulnerable.
Yeah, more vulnerable.
Fear of vulnerable.
And secondly, because you have experienced some pain. And when you experience pain, you can work with it in 3 ways. You can either feel like a victim and sink into it, or you can become a perpetrator and play it right back to the person and hurt them the way that they hurt you. And the third is to transcend it by learning from what it took place in order to teach you. And that's by far the more difficult. And it takes help to get there.
Yes. Someone who's
that's-
objective, seeing
Yeah.
both sides and thinking clearly.
Um,
And
the-
listening to what's the feelings behind the words that are being used by both parties.
In fact, the way that the brain is set up is that you have the 3 layers of brain. You have the brain stem, which is responsible for all the stuff you don't even think about. And then on top of that is the limbic system, which is the emotional brain. And on top of that is the cortex, which makes the sort of rational choices. So what happens when you see something that is threatening, if there was a snake that were to come into the room right now, the information from your eyes would go straight to the visual cortex in the back of your brain, but it would also go straight to 2 little places called the amygdala, which is located right here. And that's the threat detector. And the amygdala is hardwired to the adrenal glands and sends out adrenaline and messages. First message is to the front part of your brain to say, go ahead and think whatever you want. We're paying no attention. We're hijacking the brain because life is at stake here. So we're just going to go back down the ladder to the stuff that you know how to do automatically, and we're not going to take time to think it over. You can go ahead and do that stuff if you want to, but it doesn't matter. And we're pumping blood to your arms so you can hit and legs so that you can run. And we're stopping digestion because we need that blood. And we're doing a whole series of things, dilating your pupils so that you can see everything that's going down, and creating memories very, very rapidly and very deeply. And that's essentially what the amygdala does, and it gets triggered in every conflict. So that's one piece of what happens, and it's the reason why we need to have, all of us, a deeper understanding of conflict resolution and learn how to see our conflicts as opportunities for growth and learning, and higher levels of collaboration and partnership.
Wow. It's something that really interested me when I was reading is over the last decade, I think there's been an increase in the importance and influence of spirituality
Yes.
in dispute resolution.
In my view, conflicts take place on multiple levels, and here are the levels I think that they take place on. First, they're physical. They happen inside of our bodies. We have bodily responses to conflict, including the memories of conflicts, which get held on to in our bodies in various forms, and stiff shoulders and headaches and all kinds of things. Secondly, they have a mental location, that is, as ideas, as issues, as problems that need to be solved, as disagreements. Third, they have an emotional location. So we can say that there's clearly physical, mental, and emotional. But there's another location that they have. In fact, they have three other locations. The first is they are located in your memory of what happened to you in the form of a kind of holding on. And so if you think, what do we call it if you don't hold on to your conflicts anymore? The answer is forgiveness. And now if we ask what kind of act is forgiveness, I think it's a spiritual act. But by spiritual, what I mean is life energy. It has to do with the quality of life energy that the amount of attachment in terms of your life that you have to conflict. So forgiveness is a way of releasing yourself from the burden of your own false expectations of other people. It's a way of reclaiming your life energy. Annie Lamont says, forgiveness means giving up all hopes of having a better past. And that's really what it is. So after forgiveness and after the spiritual level, there's something else. You can forgive someone, and every time you see them, a little knife goes right through your heart. And now, what is that about? Well, if we think about it, what's the last part of you that opens up to somebody that you've been in conflict with? And I think for all of us, it's our hearts. So we shut our hearts to other people when we're in conflict with them. So opening your heart again, I think of as reconciliation. There's a final place where conflicts are located, and that is in the environment, in the context, in the systems that we are living in, organizational systems, family systems, social systems. All of these have an impact on the way that we experience conflict. So those are the places, I think, that where we can see that there's spiritual work to be done, as well as physical, mental, and emotional work, and in these other locations as well.
Thank you very much. I'd like to take another quick break and come back and spend just a few moments with some of the books that you have written and what's next with you.
Thank you.
And your work. Stay with us another moment for a short break, and we'll come back to Kenneth Cloke and the Dance of the Opposites.
Not it. Not it. Again? Hey, Dad.
Dad.
There are other ways of saving money and energy around your house. Did you know that LADWP is now offering cash rebates for you to retrofit your home to be more energy and water efficient? It's good for California, and it's good for Dad. Let's make California a better place to live, starting with our homes. To get your rebates, go to www.ladwp.com/save.
Not it. Not it.
back. We're back with Kenneth Cloke and the Dance of the Opposites, and in my conversations here at Authors Night, it's easy to understand the success of the man and how vital you must be to people's disagreements and disputes, and how valuable the experience must be for everyone. So again, I'm very, very pleased that we were able to get together. But tell us something about the other books that you have written, and then how to reach you, and what's next in your life.
Okay.
So let's go back. What books have you written besides this one?
Mediation, Revenge, and the Magic of Forgiveness. Thank God it's Monday. 14 Values We Need to Humanize the Way We Work. Resolving Conflicts at Work. 10 Strategies for Everyone on the Job. The End of Management and the Rise of Organizational Democracy. The Art of Waking People Up. Cultivating Awareness and Authenticity at Work. Did I mention Mediating Dangerously? No. Mediating Dangerously, The Frontiers of Conflict Resolution. The Crossroads of Conflict, A Journey into the Heart of Dispute Resolution. And the last one is Conflict Revolution, Designing Preventative Systems for Chronic Social, Economic, and Political Conflicts. Those are the main ones.
Now, this book, fortunately, we're very proud to say, will be in our library collection. How do the people obtain copies of your work, this book and others?
Probably through Amazon or places like that. I have a website that people could go to and order books there, www.kennethcloke.com.
What is next for you?
Together with Ron Sapanchik and a number of others, started an organization called Mediators Beyond Borders. And we work internationally, helping to build conflict resolution capacity around the world. So we model ourselves a little bit on Doctors Without Borders. For the last several years, I've been working in Athens, teaching mediators how to conduct dialogues between immigrants and Greek citizens. We're about to take off for Cambodia to train villagers in how to resolve land disputes where they're fighting over whose property is this, and a series of other conflicts like that. We're working in South Sudan, in conflicts between Sudan and South Sudan, in Rwanda, in conflicts between Hutus and Tutsis. We have had projects in Ecuador, in Colombia, and Zimbabwe. We have a project in Sierra Leone. And I will be going to Europe in the spring to help train people in how to conduct conversations between Christians, Jews, and Muslims.
No wonder I can never reach you. You're always so busy. You're always so traveling everywhere. But what a wonderful, fulfilling life to know that
I
you're doing
agree
something
completely.
you love, successful at, and
Yeah.
helping others in the process.
It's tremendously rewarding, and one of the pieces that is so rewarding about it is that not only do people have the capacity to behave really badly in conflict, they also have the capacity to rise above those destructive ways and actually enjoy each other and enjoy their disagreements, their diversity, their differences. Vive la différence is the saying.
Thank you very much. What a joy it was to have you. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience did as well. And I'll leave with this quote from Alfred Camus, that the purpose of a writer, such as yourself, is to keep civilization from destroying itself. And thank you very much again. And thank you, our audience, for joining us for Authors Night. I thank the Media Operations Department, the City of Calabasas, and of course, our very own Calabasas Library.
Thank you.